it's our pleasure to have Arnab and Jay with us today. A very warm welcome to each one of you. Let me start by introducing ADI. It's the only professional network of design practitioners and students set up as a not-for-profit to align and promote the interests of design professionals in India. Our chapters are spread over 6 cities and growing. In the last 10 years of our existence, we have increasingly become the voice of design community and have taken initiatives to promote their professional interests. So designers have responded in various ways to this new COVID-19 challenge. We thought we must bring to fore these efforts, and this is our first webinar in Design Response series. Over to you, Suresh.
Thanks, Hemant. Right, let's dive right into the meat of the discussion. Arnab and Jay, unbeknownst to you, we also are going to poll the audience. We have a few poll questions, and you'll see the results of the poll. So, Anshu, let's start with the first poll before we start the discussion. Question number 1 for our audience who've already logged in. I think we have 400 plus people logged in. Is, have you downloaded the Aarogya Setu app? Your options are yes, no, no, but I'm thinking of doing it. Yes, I downloaded it, but I stopped at the registration page. I haven't started using it. I'm in category 4, just for the record. Right, we have 20 seconds for you to vote. And please, members of the audience and attendees, you're welcome to vote. Panelists can't vote. Right, that's the end of the poll. All right, JD, you're in a reasonably good shape. 45% of people have downloaded it, and another 14% are saying yes, but haven't started using it. We have 23% as a firm no, and 18% no, but thinking of doing it. All right, so that gives us a sense of where our audience is. Let's start with the first question. So, JD, let me start with you. What does Aarogya Setu do? How does it work? Sorry, JD, if you can hear me, you need to unmute yourself.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, let me try and share my screen and tell you a little story that might make it easier, because I have heard a lot of different sort of interpretations of what people think of Aarogya Setu and how it works. So here goes. So that's Aarogya Setu. And so let's assume on March 15th, you were out there shopping and you passed a Mr. X. Obviously, you don't remember him. He doesn't remember you. And obviously, he has no symptoms. He was asymptomatic. Even if anyone did a kind of temperature check, nothing would have shown up. He is unaware that he has COVID. Neither are you aware. But let's say a few days later, on March 23, following a bunch of kind of complications or sort of symptoms, he is tested COVID positive. Now, the question is, I mean, we'll have to, I think just forget Aarogya Setu for a moment. What happens in that case? Whether it's the government, whether it's the police, it's a whole bunch of people trying to figure out where did Mr. X go? Obviously, maybe he went shopping thrice. The cashier, he would have paid money. They would have exchanged, there would have been a touch kind of through money or through a card or through kind of the ATM or a bunch of things kind of, right? But were you one of them? Was your spouse one of them? I think it's a huge mystery, and you just can't really trace back and go back and figure it out. What something like Aarogya Setu does, and it's called a contact tracing app, is essentially helps you retrace those steps and figure out if you ever came in contact with someone who eventually got tested or was actually positive or was even aware that he's positive, was roaming around. Given all those scenarios, Aarogya Setu just helps you trace back those steps. Technology is fairly simple and complex. Simple in the sense it's GPS and Bluetooth, something that we are used to kind of every way. GPS gives you a fairly broader range. Bluetooth gives you a much more accurate kind of 5 feet distance. That's what we are probably interested in. Where are you in 5 feet distance of the person, really, kind of. And that's what probably it does. I think if this person tests positive, I think you retrace back and you warn everyone saying, listen, you were in contact with X. And just be aware, just be safe. If you show symptoms, just lock yourself in for a few days. I think it's a great way of keeping your own family members safe, your neighbors safe, your community safe. That's probably how it works. So that's a very simple thing in a nutshell.
Okay, Jerry, let me ask you one question here. I see the gentleman in the photograph. Will the app tell me who that person was and therefore people can start avoiding him? Does it invade his privacy, the person who eventually tested positive?
No, you never know who that person is. I mean, So I think the funny one which I've heard is that it's almost like an app which tells you as you go closer to someone who's COVID positive, it starts beeping and all. No, nothing of that sort. It does no magic like that. It's not like a water kind of healer or one of those things where it kind of detects and starts beeping. Nothing. It's super private. We don't know your data. It's all encrypted. It's all kind of put in a layer of kind of encryption. Unless the person tests positive and then decides to push it out to the government. Then again, anyway, that's a different story.
We'll get to that in the later part of the conversation.
We will. And I think I'll let Arnab take some of those questions.
Arnab, first of all, I've never met a member of the NITI Aayog in his t-shirt. So this is the first for me. Sorry, Arnab, can you hear me? This is Suresh here.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I was just saying I've never interviewed a member of the NITI Aayog in his t-shirt ever in my life. It's always informal. Okay.
Yeah, does that help if I tell you I was a banker 3 years ago? Joined government only 3 years ago.
All right. Okay. So we saw your photograph with suit and tie. Okay. First question for you. The Aarogya Setu app. The government is fighting the COVID pandemic through multiple tools. Tell us how this tool fits in the fight, in the overall strategy.
See, when you look at the enemy, you probably know very little about the factor that you are fighting against. You have 3 layers that become important to you. The first layer is the people on the front line, the doctors, the nurses, and the medical professionals. And powering them is people who are doing research so that they can stay ahead of the game, hopefully. The second is the infrastructure layer, which is your protective equipments, requisite medicines, drug formulation, if you reach them. And third is the power of intelligence. So consider Aarogya Setu something which is analogous to having that Turing machine in World War.
Arnab, if you can hear us, your connection is a bit
we have to give
spotty.
that. So that is, yeah.
Your connection is a bit spotty. Your words are going in and out. A couple of sentences are getting dropped out. So if you could move closer to your Wi-Fi source, that might help us.
All right. So hope this gets improved in a minute or so. So my answer was that think of Aarogya Setu as a Turing machine of World War II. The idea is to give advanced intelligence to our frontline healthcare workers, to our medical administrators, etc. So that is the important part to understand. We do not know this enemy, and we cannot fight this enemy unless we try to stay ahead of the enemy. And that is where we are trying to gather as much intelligence in an automated manner and put the layer of data intelligence and AI on top of it, so that we can see if we can predict the direction and the velocity of infection and try to break the chain when people are still asymptomatic. So that's the whole idea.
All right. So the Turing machine in World War II is the analogy that you're using, the intelligence gathering, the code breaking machine that was used to defeat the Nazis in World War II. The Aarogya Setu app is sort of that kind of intelligence engine.
Yeah.
Jay, back to you. What was the brief that you got from the NITI Aayog?
So I think the funny one was that there was no real brief. Just this morning, I was seeing this message or this tweet from Sidhu Ponappa of Gojek, where I think he talks about either you get a good brief or you get involved very early. I think we got involved very early, where what this will do. I think, again, let me just kind of retrace back and say that this, again, idea comes largely from a bunch of technologists. And you could say that we were very close to technologists. This is just pre-lockdown. We were talking a lot with NITI Aayog and a whole bunch of other people. Again, the interesting part was that there were so many people involved, so many different agencies with especially Arnab, Kumar and NITI Aayog doing a whole bunch of coordination between the various departments. And I think as we kind of went ahead, so design got probably involved on day 1 of the project, saying, how do we do this? Because let's make sure that it's not something from the engineering might, we will do the scaling, we'll do all sorts of the goodness we'll bake in, but we also need to make it human-centric. And let's kind of make it that from day 1. So in the first 2 weeks, I think we had a lot of heavy lifting and also trying to understand, because everything was evolving pretty fast. We had a bunch of meetings with Aarogya Setu CEO, Amitabh Kant, to a whole lot of stakeholders, people that I didn't, which I haven't met still. I mean, the lockdown happened after. So, I mean, Arnab, interestingly, is a guy we call up each other at 3 in the night, but we haven't met yet, kind of. So I think a lot of those happened. So there was no real brief. It just evolved. And what has happened subsequently is that design, like data, like the ICMR folks, has a seat at that very organic table where we are beginning to understand what needs to be done and then say, oh, I can solve it through design, or I can solve it through technology, or maybe I need to put some manpower into it. So I think, yes, the short answer, there was really no brief. It evolved. We responded.
Okay. Arnab, what were your expectations from design and the design team? What did you think would happen?
So expectations were very simple. Let me first try to answer the question that you asked, Jay. So I was trying to think of something, because my mandate at Government of India is to find technology solutions to the problems that we may have. At the same time, Deep sent across a brief note to my CEO saying that, can we do something like this? It's just of us were thinking about just a week before Trace together. So that was important. From us, from an app perspective, our baseline is, can we make something which is usable by every single Indian user? Which means that it's so intuitive in the foreground, has to be as complicated as possible in the background, but in the foreground it has to be as simple. Our benchmark is if 400 million people in India
Sorry, we are having
WhatsApp
some problems.
At the same time, we have to also.
Sorry, Arnab, your audio is going in and out a little bit. We're missing a few sentences. We can get the gist of what you're saying, but we're missing a few sentences.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, it's going in and out a little bit. We're getting the gist of what you're saying, but a few words are dropping out and a few sentences.
So from our perspective, it was important that this is available and accessible by everybody in the country. So an equivalent of a WhatsApp is what we wanted to build in this context, and that's why when we are building.
Sorry, once again, we're having a few audio glitches on Arnab's side. We're not able to hear him clearly.
So should I'm going to do is I'm going to dive.
Arnab, you could try switching off your video and staying only on audio. Maybe the bandwidth will be enough for audio. If you'd like to switch off your video, that might help.
From my phone. Next question.
Sorry, Arnab, you're missing out what you're saying. Let's try with only audio.
So why don't you ask the next question to Jay?
Yeah,
I'm going to dial in from my phone. The internet is just not open.
All right, so we'll bring Arnab Kumar back in a second.
Yeah.
So Jay, let me talk to you while we dial Arnab back in. So this Aarogya Setu app went from concept to actual delivery to scaling up in what, 2 weeks time, 15, 16 days?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, it's a fairly complex project for 15, 16 days. Give us a sense of how it happened in such a short time. And you said you haven't met the client yet. You haven't met Arnab Kumar yet because of the travel restrictions. So give us a sense of what happened behind the scenes in those 15 days.
Yeah, as Arnab mentioned earlier, I think a bunch of people were already thinking about this in one way or the other. So I think in that sense, I think the thinking was getting developed as we were speaking to NITI Aayog and various other departments, kind of. I think the thoughts started coming together. The first one, of course, was a proof of concept. Does this really work? What they're thinking in terms of Bluetooth, GPS. Does this really kind of come together? The second one was that, okay, if it does, then what are the next steps? Because obviously, it's not just us or NITI Aayog. We collectively would have a bunch of other stakeholders like ICMR, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Virology. There's so many other sort of people involved in this whole thing. I think what is amazing is the number of stakeholders involved in this. And in a sense, there is no clear client, or actually, if you say for all of us, our client is the Indian citizen. That probably is our client collectively. We are all kind of people in service of that client. So I think a lot of that happened. what then happened is that we decided that this would be our minimum viable proposition, which just had like 2 features, which is that the ability to tell you whether you are safe based on contact tracing and based on self-assessment. So we had a self-assessment. It kind of, I'll probably show you through some of those screenshots in one of the next questions. And then as we learned, I think by then the lockdown had happened, so we had to learn on the go. I think we're learning almost every day. There are WhatsApp messages being exchanged. There are sort of reports. There is data being shared. And I think there's a whole bunch of through incidents and accidents. Sometimes you keep learning about it because you really can't go out there in the field and ask people. So we did about 3 or 4 big turns along the way in terms of design. It's amazing that we managed to do 3 big design iterations in the last, today's what, 20 days. I mean, actually we have 4 design iterations. The 4th one has yet to go out, but 4 big design iterations. Every day there is something going out. There is a front end, what we see. There is a back end, which Arnab and a whole bunch of other people, including CMs of many kind of states would see. So there is a back end, a front end. So it is fairly complex, and the speed at which we are going, that is fantastic. I think it needs a very, very closely knit team. Thankfully, the engineers, the designer who worked on it in the very initial phases, I think we were pretty much working roughly about almost all-nighters pretty much for 3 weeks, 3 weekends. Right, very patchy sleeping pattern. That's how we kind of got the first one out. Then, of course, came the second and the third and so on. So yeah. That's
and having the engineering and the tech team work, the engineering and the design team work right next to each other, was that helpful, or did that cause lots of clashes?
No, I think that was helpful because these 2 teams knew each other from before. I mean, we are part of the same company and we have worked together. We have had our own clashes. That happens. But again, in an organization setup where you're taking like 3 months to take a rollout of feature, you are probably overthinking and doing a whole bunch of things. Here we're probably having a dialogue with saying, can you do this? If you can't do this, what can you do? It's almost like a negotiation happening. Mm-hmm. Can you do this overnight? And can you get it out fast? Because I definitely need this kind of. So I think a lot of that happens. And so the engineering team and us calling each other up. Then we probably have a conversation with Arnab and Lalitesh and a whole bunch of other people. I think it's very dynamic, and we are probably on the phone a lot of time, on the WhatsApp like group chats with 3-4 people happening, and of course our meetings, which never happen on time but happens almost every day kind of. So that's the other part.
Right, Arnab, nice to have you back on. Hopefully this is a stable connection. You need to unmute yourself, Arnab. If you can hear me, you're on mute. You need to unmute yourself.
I'm unmuted now. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good to have you back.
So Arnab, you're from the earlier trouble. Sorry for the earlier trouble.
No problem. You're from the private sector and you're in the government now. Governments are not usually known for taking quick decisions and being nimble on their feet. Right? Yeah. And yet you managed to pull this off, public-private partnership in a 15-day period. And from what I understand, a record-breaking 50 million downloads in 13 days. Right?
Yeah.
Right. So how did you manage all the red tape in the government? How were you managing to be so nimble?
So it depends on which part of the government and how desperate which part of the government is to push a project. So UPI was done at a breakneck speed. So if an idea's time has come, people don't stop it. So that was one. But the good thing that worked for us was, in this case, NITI Aayog CEO, he's a phenomenal people enabler. So I just had a big idea and I had something from deep, and I said, look, this looks interesting. Can we actually pursue it? And within 2 days, he said, okay, go ahead. Within 3 days, we had a Arval app version ready, and we presented it to the highly empowered committee. They all said, okay, go ahead and do it. I don't think all of them maybe would have taken us seriously. It's like, okay, theek hai, let's see what this guy does. But
finish. Go ahead. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the thing that worked in our favor was that we were very, very fast. We started coding almost 2 days after the initial concept. We had a bunch of mock-ups, etc. ready. Everything was ready within 5 to 7 days. So that helped. We kept pushing till the people got on board. I earned a nickname called Bulldog because I didn't give up at any point of resistance from anyone. And we had a phenomenal team of technology people, design people. We have a fantastic set of people from back-end server architecture And all of us, we understood the importance of what we are trying to build and how the kind of crisis that we are in. Everybody rose to the occasion, and that is what helped all of us push this together. I mean, my CEO is a very good proponent of public-private engagement, and that probably helped a lot. But from a more product perspective, it was the sheer quality, the kind of product that we built. We were ready to support not just 50 million people, but 400 million people from day one. So we were already population scale ready. We were ready from day one to be available in 11 languages. So these kind of features, extensive security testing, etc. So all those things that you require to build a successful app, those basic building blocks, we had it ready in 10 days. And we kept pushing people like Jay, people like Deep and his team, Prashant and his team. So all of us, we're working on this 24/7 for at least 10, 12 days to get this ready. And when you have these kind of people committed to a cause, people understand and they just facilitate or make way.
I have two big takeaways from your answer. One, that an idea whose time has come, hard to stop it. And second, that you're a bulldog. We need more design bulldogs in the government. We have about 277 members who are attending. For all attendees, if you can share your questions only on the Q&A platform and not on the chat platform, that will be helpful. I'm going to get to audience questions in a little while. But before that, let's address the elephant in the room. Poll number 2, Anshu, if you can fire. How concerned are you about the privacy of your personal data? This is the big question when it comes to any app that is going to track my personal data, my movements. Here are 4 options. I'm very concerned. I stay off WhatsApp. I stay off Facebook. I don't post on Instagram. I'm sort of concerned, but I'll take my chances. I personally fall into that category. Well, it's the price I pay for convenience. Shopping sites and social websites know my preferences and it's convenient. And lastly, I would pay a premium to protect my privacy. I would pay for my own email. I'd pay for social media. I'd pay to remain anonymous and for my privacy. You have 20 seconds to vote. Sorry. Your time starts now. Right. That's poll number 2. All right. Very concerned, 45%. Sort of concerned, but I'll take my chances. People seem to fall into those 2 categories. The other 2 categories have very marginal 9 and 5%. So very concerned and sort of concerned. So let's move into the second part of our discussion, the process of how this app came about. Jay, first question, 50 million downloads in the first 13 days. So there's a design challenge and an engineering challenge. What does this kind of scale mean for the design team?
So obviously, I think there's a huge engineering challenge. And as Arnab said, I think Vikal, Rahul, and a whole bunch of other back-end engineering teams, they actually were kind of getting ready for it. From a design perspective, from an understanding perspective, I think what happens is the record time at which we do it, we have very little time to go back, do research, do this, do that. There is hardly much of time and scope to do it, right? We've seen some of the other countries like Singapore's done something, but it's a very nominal effort compared to the scale, the size, the number of languages, all of those. So on day one, and I think let me just quickly share my screen, and I think that'll probably make it more clearer. So that's your Aarogya Setu app. On day one, we started with 8 languages. We today have 11 languages. So that by itself.
Yeah, we have 12. We have Assamese also.
Oh, that's right. We have added Assamese. So I think that's 12. So 12 languages in the last 20 days. It's been a phenomenal scale up. I remember doing this page where we spent a lot of time going back and forth. And at one point, I was telling them that forget what sari she is wearing or what color, kind of let's get on with it. I mean, if you're losing a day, then that's not a good thing, kind of. So I think in some ways we are kind of saying at this point, let's go super fast. What is the minimum that we need to have on day one? So day 15, launch day 1, we launched with this. Our designer here was Asta Goel. She worked 3 weeks non-stop, kind of like flat out on this. So you had a self-assessment and you had to sort of very sort of honestly fill that in. I'll come to that story later. So on day 1, this is what you would see. You had a somewhat verbose thing. And obviously it appealed to the people who could read and read a lot and make sense of it. I think the PM also had a look, and he was like, oh, when I mean PM, I don't mean product manager. I meant
the actual prime minister.
Kind of thing, right? And a lot of people said, oh, PMs are like that. And I'm like, not PMs, I'm talking about the PM kind of. So, so I think, and obviously we kind of realized that this is getting too verbose. Maybe we should kind of change tack and make it more visual, because we have to appeal and see at this point, the app is fairly flat. I mean, there are two things you can do. One is know which stage you are at, and therefore what I need to do next. The second is I can do a self-assessment, and maybe it will tell me a bit of, am I in the risk zone or not? So the next, which was on day 4, and there were like other teams we got involved, agencies which got involved, helped us do a bunch of illustrations. Our own in-house designer, Nitesh Chandora, he did a bunch of illustrations. So it was like one crazy kind of all-nighters, and we changed it to sort of make it more visual. Now, the power of visuals so that it reaches out to a bunch of people who are not used to reading a lot. So in some ways, I call it the Adarsh Balakwala version, where we are trying to sort of make it very, very visual per se. And I think this worked. This is probably the one at which I think Modi ji tweeted, and his tweet was pinned. I think this is the point where we are starting garnering a huge number of kind of installs and downloads and all of it. But still the app is fairly flat, and we are kind of adding to it. We're learning from it every day. So this is your day 6. Your app again changes because there's a bunch of things that we want, along with, you know, at what point should you test? At what point do we want you to do this? A lot of contextualization, which was happening from day 1, becomes more visible and visual. By day 10, I think we have had a bunch of different layers which have come in. So if I may show one thing very quickly, and let me stop sharing the screen. Actually, let me just go till the end. And this is probably what you will be seeing very soon. I'm sharing it out openly out there. It's not complete yet. What we realize, I mean, the e-pass comes in. So e-pass will be part of Aarogya Setu. We also realized that a lot of people are not kind of, or they're coming to the app and they want something to happen, and they're like, well, nothing is happening. I mean, okay. So what do I do? So it's not like a social media app that something is happening all the time. There's no entertainment here. So one thing which we saw in one of the almost like 5-6 days back was that a bunch of people started playing around with the self-assessment, and they were just randomly playing. So it was inaccurate, and we wanted better data as such. So, so again, discussions in the forum that we have, and we said, let's put in some more friction there. So one friction we put in there is someone saying that, listen, we have limited resources. This is going to help us. Please answer truthfully. Once you go through it, you kind of then again says to you, are you sure you want to do this? This is, you've answered everything truthfully and correctly. So I think that helped us clarify some of the data. And these are a lot of stories from like constituencies like Varanasi and Amethi and various constituencies all across India. And you begin to know the lands and the people and how are people behaving out there. The second thing we realized also, for example, and we changed it very instantly, was, again, these changes happen in a day if we realize and if we can pull it off, is that a lot of households have one smartphone for maybe 5 people or 6 people. So they're actually doing the assessment for their mom and dad and wife and everyone. So then how do you do this? Then maybe you have to have a fork in that assessment. So these are the sort of very human-centric kind of interventions that we kept doing. Not necessarily, I mean, there are engineering solutions as well, but taking it from a very, very human story kind of thing as to how people live all across India. And again, you make one change, you got to make it in 12 languages. So every release is 12 languages multiplied by 12 almost. So that's the scale we are talking about. In 20 days, if you've done like 4 big kind of jumps, variants, that's 4 into 12, tech stacks, bifurcations, small changes, data collections, big framework changes. And not just that, there are so many agencies. For example, e-pass, if we talk about it, it's not one agency, there are so many agencies involved. How do we collate it? And that's probably something which probably Arnab and a whole group of them take care of. But yeah, it's not an easy one, bringing everyone together in a unified way.
Arnab, simple question for you. Is the app working, and how do you measure its success?
The app is working very well. Right now we are with 71 million users 7.1 crore Indians. So it's a sizable chunk. It's working well. We already have started getting early signals of people who may be asymptomatic but need to be thoroughly tested, etc. So that's a true test of success. Are we actually saving lives? Are we actually breaking the chain? That has already started happening, and once we have more data on that, maybe we'll publish how we have been able to basically intervene in a time-sensitive manner. So that's the first aspect of success. We are moving in that direction. The more data we get, the better we'll become. And that's why the more adoption the app has, the better the engine starts firing. So that's one thing. The second thing.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Yeah. And the second thing is that this is not just an urban phenomenon or an early adopter phenomenon. We have a dashboard where we can see where all the app has been downloaded from. Every single state, every single city, town in this country has a sizable presence. So that's another factor that will define the success of it. People are talking about it. People in my family are using it without I telling them to start using it. So that's a good sign. And I belong to Bihar. So if it has reached Bihar, then well, it has reached everywhere. so that is the success. But the job has just started. We have about 500 million smartphone users in this country. We have several others who are on feature phone. We need to make sure that the solution is there for everyone, and all of us are on this to make sure that we work together. Again, the point to emphasize that this is a temporary solution to a temporary problem, and hence there is an urgency in the sense of how soon we can get this in the hand of every single citizen, so that you are protected and your family is protected, and B, you do not have to rely on multiple sources of information. The WhatsApp forwards should not be your source of information. This app should be your source of information. So that will be actual success if this is in hands of everyone in the country.
And what happens to those with feature phones, Arnab?
So the ones with the feature phones, unfortunately, the technology on feature phone does not allow you to do accurate contact tracing. The solution for that is that the one that we have proposed right now is an interactive voice response system. So maybe they can use an IVRS to help us with their symptoms or additional information, so that we can reach out to them. We have been discussing at NITI Aayog level on how to systematically remove the lockdown, at least for the people who are involved in certain sectors. Manufacturing, etc. And the idea is, can we actually motivate people to help use this situation to migrate from feature to smartphones? Can some of the business owners enable their workers to have smartphones to start with? Because there's a cost to them not attending the work every day. So can we actually use this opportunity to leapfrog to a more smartphone penetration? Those are some of the things that we are thinking of. But immediate solution for feature phones is IVRS. We have one set of feature phones, which is Geo phones. They have Kai OS. Fortunately, we are building an app version for them also.
Any question for you? I know there were many design challenges in this project. Name the top 3 design challenges that you faced as a designer.
I think one, of course, is the size and scale. Size, scale, speed probably is like one combined challenge. Size in the sense of size and scale, probably the same thing. You're doing it for 1 million people, so several million people. So every small feature, every small change, you need to make it fairly fast because things are happening. Like at one point, I think we clocked about 100,000 downloads a minute. On the average, we do about 5,000 downloads a minute. Some days it goes up to 20,000 downloads a minute. Like when you have those, and when you say, I need to get this out fast, I think that's a different sense of challenge. And we don't know how long this will last. I hope it lasts very, very less, and probably the app becomes redundant, obviously. So you need to think fast, you need to find solutions, you need to get it out there, again, learn from this and put it back again. So that's one part of it. The other scale is, of course, the languages, because there are some languages that we do not speak. I hope it's getting translated right. I hope the meaning and everything goes right. And you need to do it in all the languages, make sure everything goes right. The third thing, of course, is working with people that you've never met. I think if people talk about working remote, this is a different level of challenge because you're working remotely with people that you've never met. You have no context who they were in their past life and exactly what do they do. So I think you're discovering that as you go on, and then you realize, this guy actually makes some very good points. And I think, and then I think, for example, when we started, we had no idea about Arnab setup. I mean, of course, NITI Aayog and know Amitabh Kant and all the stories around that. But apart from that, how does NITI Aayog work on a day-to-day basis? So I remember having this very funny discussion with Arnab on the logo for Aarogya Setu, and the name kept changing. So I think that again was because I had no context into how they work, who approves, what happens. In some ways, it was like, this is the logo and this is the thing, and let's go with it. So I think those were the real challenges, which were a lot of it. The third big challenge would be the designers. So for example, very often you will have a few designers to a lot of engineers. And I think the way we solved it was that the first designer, I think she was there almost, as I was mentioning, Asta, I think 3 weeks of complete full on stretch work kind of, and I think she got completely burnt out. So it was almost like thinking in terms of that there'll be teams replacing each other every 3 or 4 weeks, but the work will continue because we also have got our day jobs and our other bits of work to take care of. So how do we keep that knowledge going? At the same time, we ensure there's no burnout for our people as such.
All right, it's time for our third audience poll. Anshu, if you can fire the poll. Right, do you think this Aarogya Setu app experience will pave the way for more government designer collaborations? One of the things that designers have been asking for is greater engagement with the government and more meaningful collaborations. You have 4 options. Yes, it will. No, it won't. Yes, it will, but only in times of crisis. No, only if somebody senior in the government pushes for design, what Arnab politely referred to as a design bulldog within the government. You have 4 options and 20 seconds to vote. All right, voting is complete. All right, Arnab, you were expecting this answer, weren't you?
Yeah.
Only if somebody senior in government, a design bulldog, pushes for good design. So Arnab, why is it so hard for designers and the government to interact? Why is it so hard to push good design within the annals of government?
It's very difficult to push anything in the government. Forget about design. I mean, bureaucrats, and I'm not a bureaucrat, so I shouldn't be saying on their behalf, but bureaucrats typically don't want to make decisions.
Okay.
So it becomes difficult for them to then evaluate this design versus that design versus X, Y, Z. And look, the government's a complicated machinery. A lot of us think of government as a monolith, but government is actually a Ferris wheel with many components. Mm-hmm. So NITI Aayog has got it done with the help of Jay and other people. The same agency will not be able to work on something like this going forward or for the next assignment. It becomes very difficult. It all depends on what is the need. And as I said in my opening statement, an idea was time has come. If that happens, things will get pushed very fast. You have seen Mr. Khan design campaigns like God's Own Country, Incredible India, etc. So those things can happen. We have seen some other work happening from a pure design perspective happening in government, but chances are, yes, you need a champion within the government who understands this and who keeps pushing this. That is very important.
Right, Jay, now let's address the elephant in the room, the concerns about security, mass surveillance, data leaks, hacking. Various seemingly secure websites around the world, financial websites, banking websites, have been hacked and private data has been leaked. How are we so sure that the data in the Aarogya Setu app won't be leaked? And then people who are, for instance, corona positive, aren't ostracized from their buildings?
So I think the answer to that probably is that great quote, the paranoid survive. And I guess we are super paranoid about everything. And I think Arnab and team always kind of, and I think other departments as well, we have been working with ethical hackers to understand where there might be issues. I think we are very sort of, hubris is a dangerous thing. And I think that's one thing that we thankfully don't have. And we're kind of feeling a little, what if this happens? I think that does keep us awake at night, and more so with folks in the government. I think there is NIC and there are a bunch of agencies who are kind of tasked with that. So yeah, I think paranoia. I think that's probably the operating word
Paranoia
here.
is...
Yeah, if I can attempt to answer that.
Yeah, Arnab, same question to you actually.
Yeah, so allow me to answer that. The thing is that you have to understand how the data will get leaked, and that is what we have woven into our design. So our design principle from day one was this has to be privacy by design. Let's break this down into the important components of your data collection. Now, the first important point at which we collect your data is your mobile phone number and your personal information at the time of registration. And we assign you a unique device ID basis. It's a random anonymized number and alphanumeric character. And we combine this to your phone. We do this as a one-time exercise, and we put this in a server securely. And all those encryption, etc., have been thoroughly tested. We bombarded the system for 5 days for any leakages, etc. So that's the first part. That is your phone number, your name, your age, your sex, etc. So that gets stored on a secure server. And going forward, what we use for your identification is a unique device ID. I mean, you take your device ID, you give it to whatever number of people. It just does not matter. The second piece of information that we capture, and that is the most voluminous information, is your contact tracing, which is when you come in contact with somebody who also has Aarogya Setu installed. So what was the duration of your meeting? What was the timestamp of your meeting? How far apart the two of you were, and what GPS location you met this person. Now, this is the bulk of all the information that we capture from Aarogya Setu. This information stays on your phone. It uses the encryption key and native encryption key of your phone, Android, iOS, and this does not get pulled to the server unless absolutely necessary. So, for example, for 100 cases, in 99.5% cases, this will never be pulled. And after 30 days, if we do not need this information, this gets deleted. So since we have never pushed it to the server, since it stayed on your phone in native encryption, this cannot get compromised. The only time when we pull this information to the server is that when you have met somebody who may have been diagnosed COVID-19 positive. So that is a half a percent people, and that we push to the server, again, not through any personal information, again through a device ID. So device ID 1257AB35D has met device ID 2463XY5. For 5 minutes on 7th April, 1.5 meter apart. What will you do with this information? Mm-hmm. What we do is that we combine the probability that we calculate and we push it back to the server using the device ID. So I'm not going to use your personal information at all. So I'm very happy for somebody to actually go and crack it and leak this information. But what will you do with the device ID mobile number pairing unless you crack that too? Mm-hmm. And the final thing is that at the time of self-assessment also, we use it again through device ID. We do not use it through your personal information. Whatever we store on the server, in the case of non-risk people, we delete it in 45 days. For people who may have been diagnosed COVID-19 positive, we delete it in 60 days. No third party, including Jed, do not get offended. Jed does not have access to the data. Mm-hmm. Only the people in the government who are directly related and are working on COVID-19 related medical intervention, medical planning, have access to the data, again through a secure VPN tunnel. And we know who all are downloading data. We have a log of that. So if you are going to willingly leak that information, we know who you are. So we have put that kind of security check as well. We are never going to reveal the personal identity of who is COVID-19 positive, never. That's a promise. And we're going to make sure that does not happen. We will make sure that people in the neighborhood will get to know who became COVID-19 positive through other evidences, but not through Aarogya Setu. So that's a promise. And no entity apart from Government of India is going to use your data, and also only for medical intervention. We do not use your location information on an individual basis. We use it only on an aggregate basis. So there's no chance of surveillance. We only use this information for identifying hotspots and how the disease is moving. So these are the basic privacy principles woven into the product. And as Jay said, we are a bunch of paranoid people. We keep fighting almost every day, and we keep saying that forgive us, but we are just too paranoid.
All right. So only the paranoid survive, borrowing a line from Andy Grove's book. It's time for our final audience poll. Arnab and Jay, this is a moment of truth for you. The audience gets to rate the quality of the app. Anshu, if we can fire poll number 4. How would you rate the Aarogya Setu app in terms of design? Right? A, excellent. B, not too bad. C, poor design. And D, haven't tried it yet, so no opinion. 20 seconds, vote away. All right, JD, you're in good shape. Not too bad. An excellent, 22%. Not too bad, 43%. Only 3% says poor design. But you do have a troubling number on the bottom. 33% of the design community says they haven't tried it yet. Right? So, question for Arnab. People are, in spite of all your assurances, people are still concerned, and we have lots of questions about privacy and data. So, Prem Chandawar asks, for instance, would the government be willing to make this an open source product?
Yes.
You would be making release the source
we
code.
will make this is Government of India property. We'll make this open source. The product is currently evolving, so that's why we are little hesitant in putting out an incomplete product. Once we stabilize this, we'll make this open source.
All right. Let's take in a few more audience questions. Sorry, my eyes are going to be distracted a bit. Sujay Mahadik from Mumbai asks, I think this is for Arnab, post the COVID pandemic, does the app have a life beyond that? What use is the app?
So the app for COVID-19 does not have any life beyond it. That's why I said it's a temporary solution to a temporary problem. But what we may have stumbled upon is the initial building block for India health stack. So everything else apart from COVID-19, which could be linked to telemedicine, teleconsultation, etc. If that people have interest in, can survive beyond COVID-19. But whatever we are doing for contact tracing, etc., has no life beyond this pandemic.
Mahima asks, and I'm going to ask Jay to answer this question. Here's a pitch post COVID-19. Can the Aarogya Setu app be used to address, for instance, domestic abuse issues around India? One of the things we're hearing is that due to the lockdown, there's a dramatic increase in domestic abuse. Do you think the app can be retooled to handle something like this?
Yeah, we have been getting requests, or a bunch of requests on to sort of repurpose the app to address a whole lot of issues. And I think it's some great suggestions. It's something that we need to sort of really discuss it internally and think through really well. Use cases, if the use case itself is not abused, then it may be a great tool as well. But this is something which we need to sort of discuss. Currently, this was not the case. This is not the use case with which we started the app. But this is something that needs a lot more in-depth discussion and debate and so on. The interesting part is that the group that we have does happen to have a lot of checks and balances within each other, because we are a whole bunch of opinionated people, kind of, right? Mm-hmm. And I think this is something which is worth considering, as there are other suggestions that we keep getting.
Okay, next question again for you, Jay. Shanu asks, was this a pro bono assignment for you? Did you do this pro bono, or was it a commercial engagement between you and the NITI Aayog?
It has been a pro bono one. We jumped into it. What happens next is something that's open to it. But I think for the moment, what we said is we want to do it. We want to help, and let's do it.
It's Jay's contribution to nation building.
Arnab, next question for you. Who all gets access to this data? I think Prem again asks, what if state governments and local agencies get access to this data? They may not have the same controls that the central government has. What happens to user data in that case?
Yeah, so state governments and the local administrations are getting data, but only the part of data that is relevant to them, and on a need to know basis. That's all. Only on a need to know basis, and only for COVID-19 medical intervention. That's all, nothing else. And again, through secure VPN tunnel, only to the designated officers.
Jay, next question for you. Yash from Bangalore asks, 15 days to develop from concept to deployment. How did you manage usability testing, which is a big part of UX design?
Yeah, I think we had to sort of, the usability testing happened in real life, kind of. I mean, all those kind of bugs that
refined it as you went along.
Kind of, yeah, we had to throw it out. I think by the time we got to actually building it, we were all remote. So in some ways, so Yatin, who's also our researcher, he and I have been talking a lot in terms of how do we research it. It's almost like, can we actually show it to our neighbor across the sea, and how do you sort of do work with this? But then we're talking about so many different sorts of people out here. I mean, people on the street, a whole bunch of different people. So I think we are relying a lot on bugs, on user stories, people who come back to us, complaints, and even large volume of kind of data collection, or the way people are accessing it, or issues, etc. So I think, yeah, a lot of it is actually not leading, but lagging data.
Arnab, next question for you. What's next in the fight against COVID-19? Where do we stand?
So the next and the most important phase is that we need to have intelligence from the contact tracing that we have done so far. All the positive cases that we have seen, we have to identify who all they may have affected. And we need to make sure that we thoroughly test them. We make sure that we have the requisite medical care available for them. And we need to identify and understand how the disease is moving. And we need to be ready for those new hotspots. So that is something that will keep us busy for the next several weeks, making sure that the intelligence that we are gathering through generous support of the citizens that have trusted us with this app actually gets used to save lives. So that is the most important part of the app that we are currently in, and also making sure that we give the necessary help for people in these difficult times. For example, we have integrated e-pass, so if your movement becomes easy, we will integrate telemedicine video consultation to the app so that you don't have to step out of your home if you have some symptoms which may or may not relate to COVID-19, but you want a quick consultation, etc. So those are the things that we are thinking from an immediate perspective. We are not planning from say what happens in the next 3 months or 6 months perspective. What we have done is that we have made sure that we have stay focused. What's needed in the next 10 days? What's needed in the next 15 days? Can we solve for those? And can we solve for those very, very quickly is what we have been. So multiple quick iterations and multiple quick solutions is what the app is in a completely modular format.
You've used the word e-pass a couple of times. What is it and how does it work?
So e-pass is a simple thing. So most state governments are already doing it, which is that for people with essential services, for example, grocery, milk, food, etc., bank tellers, etc., they have issued passes so that they are not stopped during the time of lockdown. They are given in both digital and analog format, paper format. For all the ones that have been issued in digital format, can we integrate this to the app so that you don't have to use multiple channels to show the same information? So that is what we have integrated. And going forward, we want this app to be one-stop solution for everything related to COVID. e-pass becomes one of them.
Jay, final question for you. What's next in terms of design as far as the Aarogya Setu app is concerned? What's the next iteration going to involve?
Yeah, I think there's quite a few in the pipeline, which is, of course, as I said, a new bunch of people have taken over, kind of as Asta's handed it over to Digjot and Akash and a bunch of people who are taking it on. I think what's also one thing that we realize is that there's a lot of good information out there, which is, let's say, video on how to make your own mask. And this is something which appeals a lot to people on the street. When I mean on the street, I think it's a very different set of people, kind of. Maybe video is the one which is kind of unifying in many ways, the TikTok world of it. So we are probably going to be bringing in a lot more of it because there's a lot of good stuff out there from the government, from other sort of folks out there. So like, for example, how to make a mask. I mean, I through while researching that, I realized actually I could make a mask without stitching a thing. So there are these kind of things we want to aggregate and put them all in. It's almost like great recipes for the lockdown and beyond. So we want to put it in, and it's also for those busybodies who want to keep themselves busy with the app and do something on the app. I think it's a great way to sort of check it out. The other is probably greater personalization. I think we really need to refine it, greater in terms of data, better data collection. All those things are very, very sort of there. Of course, the other bit which we are thinking along is how do we make illustrations? How do we make GIFs? How do we use it to sort of tell better stories? Right now, it's still a very functional, usable, and useful app. But how do we make it even better? How do we make it stickier so that you keep coming back to it every day? So I think those are the ones that we are kind of looking at and exploring more and more. Of course, there are a couple of things like how do we help you make better usage of your Bluetooth kind of, and because those are sort of power consuming. And if you, so there are so much of thinking around what happens to a guy who doesn't have a place to charge? How can we get him to maximize it? There are lots of thoughts around it, but I think, as we said, we are hurtling at a crazy speed. We need to sometimes, and we have only so much of people out there. So given the finite and the sort of infinite kind of ideas and time that we are kind of running with, a bunch of these things to go along.
Arnab, final word from you for those people who have been part of the webinar and still sitting on the fence about downloading the app, don't want to be part of a government surveillance program, don't want to share my data. Any words of wisdom that you would do to convince them to say, don't worry, your data is in safe hands?
Yeah, so all I can say is that in times like these, you have to trust someone. trust someone who has powered all the payments infrastructure in the country. UPI is government owned. All of us use UPI, and all of us actually share more information on UPI than on Aarogya Setu. That has always been secure. You also share a lot of information on Aadhaar. 1.3 billion people have Aadhaar, and that has been, again, the government has been a fiduciary of your information. On a lighter note, if you are still not convinced, we just have hired a new brand ambassador. Check out Ajay Devgan's Twitter feed.
All right. Thank you, Arnab. That's a good closing note. We have about 300 people who have attended this webinar today. I'd like to thank all 300 of them. We have hundreds of questions. Jay and Arnab, we're going to sort of summarize these questions and send them to you as an info packet afterwards. So you get a sense of what kind of questions have come in. So to all the 300 plus people who've signed in, the attendees, I'd like to thank you on behalf of ADI. Thank you for taking out an hour of your valuable time to be part of this discussion. For those of you who saw part of this or were not able to attend it, we will be releasing a video of this entire webinar on the ADI YouTube channel. We will share details of that. That brings us to the end of this webinar. I'd like to hand it over to Hemant Suthar again for a quick closing note. Hemant, if you can unmute yourself.
Thanks, Suresh. It was a very enlightening session. Thanks, Arnab, for letting us know how to work with government and NITI Aayog probably. And I hope you continue to be the bulldog for us designers. To help you out, I think Michael and his team are working on a portal where we're going to put all the work which designers are doing to fight COVID, and it will be those projects, and a lot of people can use it. So we would love your support in that initiative. And thanks, Jay, Suresh, and all the ADI team who's behind this. I think Anshu and Seema are putting in a lot of hard work to put together these seminars. Thank you all, and thank you all the viewers. Thank you. Stay safe and stay indoors.
And that brings us
to
the
very much.
Discussion. Jay, Arnab, Hemant, Seema, Anshu, the ADI team, and all attendees. Thank you very much for joining. We'll see you again soon. Bye.
Thank you.